What's good, y'all? This your boy Black G92. Now, for this afternoon, I'm going to do a reaction to another Wrestle with Andy documentary titled The McMahon's. And parentheses, Wrestling's Greatest Families, in the third episode of said series. So I'm going to go ahead and see what this documentary is looking like in about 3, 2, 1. And shout out to the people that gave me this video to react to. Let's go. Hold up.
The McMahon family may be the most important family in all of wrestling history. Yes, as the royal family of the ring, Vince and his nearest and dearest have been able to transform wrestling, taking it from the old territorial days of his father and grandfather through the sports entertainment spectacular that he and his wife would create, all the way to the publicly traded company that his daughter looks set to inherit one day in the future. So,
Dope.
how did it all happen? Well, join us today as we take a deep dive into their entire storied history in The McMahon's, Wrestling's Greatest Families, Episode 3. It begins all the way back in Manhattan, New York on October 29, 1882, when Roderick James McMahon, himself a descendant of the Tumman McMahon clan of Western Ireland, was born to Irish immigrants Roderick Sr. and Elizabeth. And ever the entrepreneur like his hotel owner father, Roderick James, or Jess as he was known to his friends, would work hard as a youth, eventually getting himself to the point where, in 1909, he and his brother Edward became managing partners of the Olympic Athletic Boxing Club, there regularly promoting young black fighters when others wouldn't give them the chance. But with interest in boxing waning...
That's based. That's based right there, man.
Jess, as he was known to his friends, would work hard as a youth, eventually getting himself to the point where, in 1909, he and his brother Edward became managing partners of the Olympic Athletic Boxing Club, there regularly promoting young black fighters when others wouldn't give them the chance.
Yeah, that was dope of them to do that. That's dope.
The two siblings would be forced to diversify soon after this as, from there, they would found the New York Lincoln Giants, an all-African-American baseball team. Then later follow this up by becoming owners of the Lincoln Stars.
Wow.
After that, Jess
That's
married
impressive.
his longtime love, Rose, as the two would go on to have 3 children together, Roderick, Dorothy, and Vincent James. Then, once the new family had found their footing, they'd move over to Long Island, where Dad began promoting professional wrestling shows at the Freeport Municipal Stadium. And this would eventually give him the power to form the Trust, a business dealing with other local promoters that allowed him access to the entire New York territory. So powerful did he become after this, in fact, during the late 1930s, when wrestling's popularity began waning following the revelation amongst many that the whole thing was being staged. Jess was able to carry on when others had to call it a day, powering through this dark period as he became the only man who hosted wrestling shows at Madison Square Garden.
Okay.
And as the apple of his dad's eye, his youngest son Vincent would frequently go with him to these shows, learning the craft of promotion from him as he quickly fell in love with the ways of the ring. So it should have come as no surprise then that when Jess died in 1954 as a result of a cerebral hemorrhage, Vincent would take over the family business. There, setting his sights on taking things to another level altogether as, in the wake of the recent development of television, he believed he could reach a far bigger audience. And this would prove to be true, as after taking a brief break to get married to his longtime girlfriend Victoria, then have 2 children, Roderick and Vincent Kennedy, the latter of whom was born on August 24th, 1945, he would use the added popularity the industry was experiencing from TV to form the Capitol Wrestling Corporation on January 7th, 1953, quickly taking control of New York, New Jersey, and Baltimore as he expanded the territory's reach that much further.
Wow.
After that,
that's
the next
impressive.
step was to branch out nationwide as, with Toots Mondt, a member of the famed Gold Dust Trio.
Yeah, you gotta do that as a business person. Like, gotta expand out to different territories as such, or for it to grow. Once it starts growing, that is, of course. But yeah, very smart of him to do that, for real.
As his most trusted general, Vincent would apply to join the National Wrestling Alliance, something he was quickly able to do. From there, then, he would continue to build his influence as the man who controlled one of the most lucrative territories in the country, eventually reaching a point where he held approximately 70% of the NWA's booking power, all as, in his personal life, he would get married to his second wife, Juanita.
Okay,
This would
Juanita.
leave his relationship with his two sons somewhat fractured, as being forced to grow up with a series of abusive stepfathers instead, Vincent Jr. in particular would grow resentful of his dad. Eventually, though, the two would reconcile, as, wanting to learn the ways of the wrestling industry himself so as to escape his poor upbringing, Vince Jr. would start to work with his old man, with him even being there when, in 1963, after having had a dispute with the NWA about Nature Boy Buddy Rogers being booked to win their World Heavyweight title, the CWC would decide to secede from the alliance, from there changing their name to the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, as they became the NWA's chief competitor.
SeatGeek is the ticketing app for fans like the High Five Strangers guy.
Shut up.
And pretty quickly, given their prime New York location, the WWWF would become the place to be for any wrestlers wanting to earn a big payday. Something that was especially true as Vincent was one of the few promoters of the time who was known to split the live gate ticket sales with his performers. This then garnered him a lot of respect amongst his peers, but it wasn't to say that he didn't act as a traditionalist in other ways. In fact, like most other promoters, he refused to appear as an on-screen character during his time running things, believing it to be his role to stay behind the scenes and book the show instead.
Smart guy.
He was noted for not being a fan of wrestlers going out to do extracurricular activities such as movies, something which actually led to a brief falling out between him and Hulk Hogan when the latter got a role in Rocky III in 1982. So, being effectively blackballed from New York for a time after that, the Hulkster would move over to Vern Gagne's American Wrestling Association for a while instead, there letting the heat die down as, meanwhile, back in the WWWF, Vince Jr. was making plans to buy the promotion from his father.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
at this point, Vince Sr. was in his 60s and starting to think about retirement. That was why, later that year, when his son came to him with a proposal, he accepted, on the one condition that Vince Jr. respect the territorial borders that the wrestling industry was divided up into at that point, and not try to encroach on anyone else's turf. Of course, the younger McMahon had far bigger plans for the industry, one which would soon see him go against his father's wishes. After his death from pancreatic cancer on May 24th, 1984,
rest in
Vince
peace.
Jr. would really start pushing forward with his national expansion, raiding all of the other territories around the country, and taking away their biggest stars with the promise of big money contracts and worldwide TV exposure, with
Vince
none
ain't
of these
wasting no
stars
time.
being bigger than Hulk Hogan himself. And this would see the World Wrestling Federation, as the new boss would rebrand the company from there, grow to the point that it became a worldwide pop culture phenomenon in the mid-80s, one which featured larger-than-life colorful characters such as the aforementioned Hulkster, Macho Man Randy
Macho
Savage,
Man
and
Randy.
the Ultimate Warrior, just to name a few, who became household names, fully playing into the cartoon superhero side of the business and going against the old traditional ways in the process. So it should come
Seemed
as no
like a very
surprise
lit
then
time
that
period.
This angered a lot of the other older promoters out here, many of whom were unable to change with the times and who, as a result, would soon go the way of the dinosaur, while McMahon became the only major player in town. Yes, by the second half of the 80s, after having successfully run the first WrestleMania show that garnered worldwide mainstream attention with the inclusion of stars like Mr. T and Cyndi Lauper, Vince was riding high, happy in the knowledge that his brand had by that point changed things forever and would, going forward, become synonymous with the industry itself. And keeping things in the family, Vince would get his wife Linda involved as a co-chief executive of the company during this period, all while bringing their children, Shane Brandon and Stephanie Marie, who had been born on January 5th, 1970 and September 24th, 1976, respectively, along for the ride too, as they started working at the ground level, acting as referees and merchandise models for a time.
Okay. That's pretty cool.
On screen, however, Vince...
I'm sure his kids got plenty of amazing childhood stories from that time period. I'm quite sure they do.
To the role of commentator, with his real-life ownership of the company never being acknowledged. This would end up changing in 1994, though, as it was then that the steroid trial would hit, and he would be indicted by the federal government on charges of distributing anabolic steroids to his performers.
Damn.
That said, In the end, Vince was exonerated of all charges after the prosecution were unable to prove his involvement.
Oh, okay.
But this wouldn't do much to help the fact that, by then, the WWF was right in the middle of its most unpopular period, with many of its 80s stars having moved on to World Championship Wrestling, where they were being promised even bigger money contracts by the media mogul Ted Turner. This then would force McMahon and his family to get creative, as come the end of the decade, they would have fully gone to battle with WCW in a period that would become known as the Monday Night Wars, changing the direction of their company here as they started the Attitude Era. And this would lead to the second big boom period, a period which was arguably even more profitable and successful than the first, as this one saw the rise of stars such as Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Stone Cold.
But perhaps more importantly than that, this also marked the point when Vince became an on-screen character himself as, after the fallout of the Montreal Screwjob, he'd start playing a Machiavellian-like villain on screen, desperate to wrangle the WWF title away from his chief rival, Steve Austin. And this would develop into arguably the greatest storyline in wrestling history, as McMahon vs. Austin soon saw fans tuning in their millions every week, waiting to see how their hero would get the better of his boss this week. In fact, this was the storyline that would finally see them overtake WCW in the ratings, saving the company from going bankrupt in the process, as they so very nearly did in late 1997. And as an on-screen villain, Vince was able to shine, getting the better of the rattlesnake whenever he had to, but always being willing to make himself look like a fool. Aside from his rivalry with Austin, though, he would also get involved with a number of other characters too, fully delving into the madness of the circus world he'd created for himself, as he at times became both aligned and opposed to the likes of Mick Foley, The Rock, and The Undertaker. Maybe this was why, seeing how much fun their father was having with this, Shane and Stephanie would also start appearing as TV characters around this period, with Shane more often than not portraying a cocky heel with a silver spoon in his mouth. All well, his sister would initially play a doe-eyed babyface, only to then later morph into a top heel authority figure herself come the turn of the century. And the on-screen reason for this was that she'd then aligned herself with Paul Michael Levesque, known on screen as Triple H, something which would eventually lead to the two falling in love and getting married for real, a marriage that would later give them 3 children, Aurora, Murphy, and Vaughn.
They've gotten busy.
While she was doing this, Shane was getting married himself to his partner Marissa, with them going on to have 3 children of their own, Delkin, Kenyon, and Rogan, in the years that followed. Back on screen, though, it was rarely happy families, as, with even Linda becoming an on-screen character at this point, all 4 would frequently feud with each other, with this at one point infamously leading to the main event at WrestleMania 16, featuring a McMahon in every corner. As Vince came out with The Rock, Linda accompanied Mick Foley, Shane stood next to the Big Show, and Stephanie was there by her husband, Triple H's side. After that, and Shane would even become a semi-regular in-ring performer himself, seeing his father's rare matches against the likes of Steve Austin at February 1999's St. Valentine's Day Massacre, and believing he could do it better as he, from there, went on to have memorable encounters against the likes of Test, The Big Show, and Kurt Angle. And soon enough, Stephanie would follow him into the ring too, even becoming WWF Women's Champion at one point, when she beat Jacqueline on the March 28th, 2000 episode of SmackDown, from there defending the belt for a while, all before having a notable program with her father's on-screen mistress at the time, Trish Stratus.
Oh, sounds spicy.
The Sonic 2 for $5 menu.
Sonic.
I have to sit through this bullshit.
Introducing
blah 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 blah. Shut the fuck up.
And all this then would lead to the ultimate McMahon family angle when, in March of 2001, Vince would buy out his competition when he became the sole owner of WCW, formally putting an end to the Monday Night Wars, but in the process, starting what would become known as the Invasion, as, on the same night he announced this to the world, Shane would appear at the last episode of Nitro to tell the world that he was in fact the owner of the Southern Wrestling promotion.
Oh, okay.
Now, this was all kayfabe, of course, as in reality it was Vince who purchased them. On screen, though, this would segue into their father versus son match at WrestleMania 17, where all 4 members of the family would ultimately get involved, allowing Shane to come out the winner in the end as, from there, he vowed to restart the wars by making WCW a powerhouse once again.
Interesting
This
storyline,
would see
to
him
say the
bring
least.
Extreme Championship Wrestling into the mix too, as, with Stephanie acting as the on-screen owner of this brand, both children tried to usurp the dad going forward. Ultimately, though, the whole storyline would end in November of 2001 when WWE came out standing tall during the winner-takes-all match at that month's Survivor Series. After that, Shane and Stephanie would be kayfabe banned from the company, with the assumption at that point being that they'd never be seen on TV again. Behind the scenes, however, things were much happier for the McMahons, as by then the family had taken the WWF public, from here allowing it to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange and be open to investors, something which increased its value exponentially in the years that followed. As well as that, Vince would also enter the football world at this point when he formed the XFL, a would-be challenger to the National Football League that was supposed to feature far more focus on individual characters and fast-paced play. In the end, though, the XFL would not catch on the way he had hoped and would fold after 1 season.
Hey, something is gonna work
back
out.
to focusing all of his attention on wrestling, then, the boss would morph his company once more, this time into World Wrestling Entertainment, following the results of a lawsuit from the World Wildlife Fund. And while this new WWE would never quite be able to replicate the mainstream success of the Attitude Era again, it would grow more and more profitable every year as Vince gradually moved back into an off-screen role, instead letting his daughter and son-in-law take the reins as Stephanie became the general manager of SmackDown for a time, all while simultaneously acting as the head writer of the show behind the scenes. And while this was happening, Triple H would grow into arguably the top name of the company following the exits of Steve Austin and The Rock, dominating Raw in the years that followed in a period that saw many fans turn on him on account of his perceived burial of other wrestlers. But while many of the performers the game went up against at this time may not have been happy with the arrangement, one person who was particularly upset was Shane, who, feeling like his position as heir apparent to the company was being undermined by the increased political power of Stephanie and Triple H, would decide to leave WWE altogether in 2010. From there, branching out on his own as he became the CEO of Chinese-based broadband and video-on-demand companies China's Broadband Inc. and You On Demand. Meanwhile, as this was going on, with WWE changing their product to a more PG-themed one following the death of Chris Benoit, they would begin to pick up bigger-name sponsors, allowing their profits to continue growing as, despite many fans increasingly being turned off by the quality of the show, they continued to be more successful than ever. But Benoit's death wasn't the only reason for the change in the product, however, as in 2010 and 2012, Linda McMahon would make runs for the U.S. Senate. And with Stephanie's backstage role growing to the point that she'd become the chief brand officer, and her husband Triple H taking up a management role himself as both an on-screen authority figure and the off-screen architect of NXT, the company's developmental brand, the future looked bright for WWE.
It does look bright, indeed.
And business would only continue to get better from there, as in 2014, they would launch their next big venture, the WWE Network, a subscription streaming service that gave fans access to pretty much every piece of footage WWE owned, all for a pretty low monthly price. So really then, the only question left at this point was, what would they do next? After all, by then, Vince had all but retired as an on-screen character and had achieved just about everything possible in the wrestling world. As well as this, Stephanie and Triple H were gearing up to one day take over the company from him, all while Shane seemed to be happy doing his own thing. Well, as it turned out, in 2016, Linda McMahon would finally get a position in government when she was named the head of the Small Business Administration in the United States. And later that year, the
No wonder she looked familiar. I just didn't really keep track of her name, because I knew she looked familiar, because I may have seen her on one of these news outlets and such. But hey, congrats to her, though, for a man to get into the government world. Hats off to her, though.
Returned home when Shane finally made his comeback to wrestling, albeit now in a non-management role, as he had previously sold all of his stock in the company. But by then, despite reaching heretofore unseen levels of financial success and holding more power than they could ever have dreamed of, effectively giving them a monopoly over the wrestling industry, many fans were growing increasingly frustrated with the on-screen product that the McMahons were putting out, with a large amount seemingly only watching out of habit at that point. What they really needed, most believed, was something to shake them out of their creative complacency and force them to fight again, the same way they had against WCW in the late 90s. That was why, with the formation of All Elite Wrestling in 2019, fans were given hope once more that a new wrestling war would spark another creative golden era for WWE. But while this really hasn't happened as of yet, the company remains financially more successful than ever, even if the full monopoly they once had no longer exists. Yes, while other younger promotions have come along to steal much of their shine from the hardcore fan base, it remains undeniable that WWE is the most powerful wrestling promotion in the world in terms of brand recognition and global reach.
Oh, yeah.
That said, while the succession plans seem to have been set going forward, with Triple H and Stephanie taking over once Vince one day finally decided to call it a day, recent changes have seen this all thrown up into the air as, after failing to beat AEW during the Wednesday Night Wars, Triple H has seen himself undergo a fall from grace, losing much of his backstage power and now being left with seemingly no obvious role following his recent heart attack.
Oh, man.
As well as that, while he didn't hold any official management role by then and was primarily being used as an on-screen performer, it still came as a shock when, in early 2022, Shane himself was fired from the company after apparently having a backstage disagreement with his father over the booking of that year's Royal Rumble match.
Oh.
Yes, it might have seemed unthinkable that Vince would oust both his son and son-in-law this late in the game, but acting as a businessman first and a family member second, he did what he felt was right for WWE. Where this leaves things going forward is anyone's guess, of course, as with Vince now being 76 years old, it's unknown how much longer he'll be able to do this.
76.
Still, even if he does decide to call it a day soon, and
damn.
as some rumors have suggested, sell the company to someone like Disney or NBC, the McMahon name will remain the most beloved and vilified one in the entire industry anyway, as while many old-time promoters may still dislike him, there's no denying that the entire family remained the most important one in wrestling history, with Vince himself being probably the most game-changing figure wrestling has ever, and likely will ever see, as the man who pretty much single-handedly made it into what it is today. And that's the house that McMahon built. Well, guys, what did you think of the video? Let us know in the comments below.
Pretty insightful
Smash the like button, subscribe to the channel.
Pretty insightful documentary.
Another Instagram and Twitter.
Another insightful documentary from Wrestle with Andy, and it gave me some information I had no idea about, and had no idea that the McMahons went way back like that as far as the business into like wrestling and also other business ventures as well. And it was cool. And also, it was dope to see how each member have their own successes outside of the wrestling world and such like that. Was a good way to highlight it was pretty good, very dope that was highlighted, and yeah, it was cool to see that. That Vince kind of fired his own son, and like for some, I don't know what he got Triple H doing, but that is shady, but not shady, but that is messed up. But like I said before in the documentary, he is a businessman, so he gotta make the decisions he feel like it's right. So hey, can't fault him for that. Let's see what people say in the comment section. I always had a theory that the more hate Vince gets, the longer he lives. I suppose. Let me see. Work hard or you're. Wow, someone did this whole little, like quotes thing, whatever. Other famous people was like, "My love for superheroes: Stan Lee reading his cool LeVar Burton, be a nice person, Mr. Rogers, do everything happy, Bob Rose. Work hard or you're fired." Vince McMahon. Oh shit, that's what it sounded like near the end, especially. Yeah, no problem firing his own flesh and blood. But hey, it is a business. So it is what it is. And hopefully they don't sell to Disney, because Disney, they just buying too many damn companies. They're buying too many. So hopefully they sell off to NBC or something, man. But I pray they don't sell WWE to Disney, because it's going to really water it down. And plus then he's just all friendly and cutesy and stuff. It's like, nah. Keep Disney's claws out of WWE. Yes, that's one thing I'm going to say. So if you want me to react to any more of these documentaries, post them in the comment section below. Hit that like button, that notification button, that subscribe button. And also follow me on my social media accounts, which post in the description box below. Also follow me on follow me on social media account. I did say that about social media accounts. But anyway, Hit up that donation link to my Cash App. We post it in the description box as well to help your boy support the help support your boy with the channel and all that good stuff. If you're able to, let people know about the channel so then you can stay tuned what I have in store, so you can tune in on my live streams and my reactions. This is your boy Black G92 about to sign off. Holla at your boy. Peace.